Who had a late night? And by late night, I mean there's 2 people who actually made it here at 9 in the morning after a late night. Well played, well played. I'm only appreciative because I'm also here. And night was late enough that I left my laptop in the bar. Found it about 30 minutes ago. Whoa, we got slides. Almost going to do it live. Like Ian is a trendsetter. On purpose because I don't have a laptop. But laptop, here we go, right? In fact, it even means there's the potential for live demo. In fact, actually, it came back. And it's also not on your screen. So let me fix that real quick. The greatest part about extend screen is it to your left or is it to your right? Or is it maybe both or neither at the same time? If it came for the code, there you go. If it came for the shells, heck yeah, my people, there you go. And by came for the shells, I mean, before the talk, there's nothing better than, I should probably run that, right? Actually, good question. Did I break it or not? I would say it's perfect time for a sound check. There we go. Oh, Microsoft. Everyone saw calculator, right? That's proof. That's proof. You know what? The best way to secure your environment, and we're going to talk about that today, the best way to secure your environment against hackers, delete calc. In fact, Microsoft made it really, really difficult for us lately because they made it calculator.exe instead of calc. Oh, those guys. Can you believe it? We'll get started here as soon as we stop hearing the JS strand. And as a look ahead, if you notice the picture, I'm pretty cool. I got shades and stuff. Who here are my Wild West first timers? Oh, welcome. Keep your hand up if you actually like the first time experience. Nice. Yeah, I'll be honest with y'all. This is absolutely my favorite conference, cybersecurity-wise, period, by a significant margin. I absolutely love Wild West. 3 years running now, and with the unfortunate circumstances of DerbyCon, Loving Wild West right now. John's done an absolutely outstanding job keeping it intimate. I've never been in a conference where I've met more people every single conference than Wild West. Like, it is absolutely outstanding. I hope you all have had the same experience. And if you have not, come say hi. Seriously. I love to meet y'all. This is a great conference, and it's meant to be interpersonal, not to be necessarily here. So from that perspective, most of my best friends are not in this talk because they know that I'm giving it. You're supposed to laugh. With me, not at me. Jeez, come on, folks. Gosh. No, but seriously, with Wild West, a lot of it is you have the opportunity to talk to so many people, and people that don't necessarily get to see at the same time all of the time. And so it's really a fantastic experience. So a lot of the folks who I know really, really well, they're not here. A, because they drank too much last night. B, because these are recorded, and you'll get to see them in the future, period. Tim Medina is giving a talk at the exact same time on Kerberos. Not exactly necessarily something directly usable, but so said Microsoft on a day-to-day basis. Kerberos is essentially the underpinnings that we use for communications and connectivity on a networked environment on a day-to-day basis in general. Like, Kerberos is not outstanding. That's the last thing anyone would say about it. But it is the underpinnings of a lot of what we end up doing security testing against. And so you're not going to see that talk because Tim's giving it right now. But these are all recorded, and they're going to be on YouTube as soon as Black Hills had the opportunity to do post work on them and post them. And I definitely recommend not only his talk, but any others that you have not had the opportunity to see. There's a lot of fantastic folks here at Wild West on a year-to-year basis. It's really one of the best conferences out there. I love it. I hope you love it. I know we got about half the audience who said, I'm a first-timer. And welcome. Absolutely welcome. We're really, really happy to see you here for the first time, for the second time. Do we have any third-timers? Oh, you graybeards, all of you. Oh, my gosh. You know what? They call that the John Strand Fan Club. Unbelievable. John Strand's like, oh, I'm going to make a conference. And y'all like, I'm going to be there every single time. I can't say anything. That's me too. Woo. All righty. You ready? Y'all ready to be evil? Yeah. It's 9 in the morning. You all ready to be evil? Yeah. All righty. So that's my that's the talk. Thank you for coming. We'll see you all in the future. I'm kidding. Though to be fair, it was very nearly that. Last night I was out with Egypt, too long. Lost a chest, too much. And my laptop with all of the slides this morning was in the lost and found. Found it! This time. Rock on. Alrighty. Let's be evil. As you can tell from the picture, I am what is defined as cool. Yep, fact. No, actually, I'm a hacker, I'm a nerd, and that essentially means the opposite of everything you see. Pretender syndrome right there, the reverse of it. So I'm actually the founder of Open Security. It's just a pentest firm. We do a lot of the same kind of work that Black Hills does. But one of our biggest shticks, if you will, is this thing called Imposter Syndrome. Anyone got that? If you're raising your hand, you don't got that. If you're raising your hand, you don't got that. They told me I needed to kiss the microphone, so let's make some love, shall we? One of the biggest problems we got with the information security community, essentially, is this concept of imposter syndrome, which I don't have. And that really relates to what you believe in yourself from a positive perspective and a negative perspective. Anyone here been on InfoSec Twitter? Wow. Anyone here been on InfoSec Twitter? Seriously. Yeah. Woo. InfoSec Twitter is so awesome, isn't it? And by so awesome, I mean it's great and it's terrible at the same time. And so is essentially the community, right? We've got so many folks involved in information security who are either so much better than they think they are or so much worse than they think they are. And from the perspective of our clients, anyone here a red teamer? Pen tester? Vulnerability assessor? Cybersecurity services in general? we present value. Straight up. No holds barred, period. We present value. And it's difficult for us to realize that about ourselves. And you know who it's difficult for? It's difficult for our bosses to realize that about us. And as a result, they've pushed us toward this. InfoSec Twitter has pushed us towards this. Heck, DEFCON has pushed us towards this. Imposter syndrome. Either we're pretending to be what we're not, because if we don't actually feel that way, we can't possibly be putting out. Or conversely, we're doing the opposite because we can't imagine that we are, in fact, John Strand. From that perspective, this is the bio slide, so I'm supposed to talk about myself. Whoops. I'm a SANS instructor. Anyone here taken SANS classes before? Awesome. I'm the author of Sec 460. It's the Enterprise Vulnerability Assessment course. Allegedly, I had something to do with the creation of 570. Anyone familiar with that? We're going to talk today quite a lot about 570, and I will caveat that with the fact that I do not work for SANS. I teach for SANS. That means I'm a 1099, and I can say whatever the heck I want. However, 570 is a really good opportunity for us to speak about threat emulation, because that's kind of the perspective. And Ed Scotus is not here, right? Yes, awesome. The point being, when we talk about threat emulation at a conference venue like this, normally what I would say is founder of a company who does this kind of stuff, allegedly, or in our experience, or the last vendor that we had that we did work for, that's not going to be the case here. That's not going to be the case here. With 570, one of the lovely things is that we're doing essentially red teaming, active engagement, versus real blue teams in real time. And we built a network, which means I can tell you everything about it. I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm under an NDA. And that's fantastic. That's absolutely fabulous. So what we're talking about today is threat emulation. We're essentially talking about red teaming, threat emulation at the higher level, but also all the levels in between. And I can say details because we had a SANS course that I did research via. Don't tell them that. But fantastic. So we had blue teamers from AWS and Amazon. Ironically, those are two different companies that are completely separated. Who'd have thunk it? Caterpillar, U.S. military, not such agency. Evidently, it's a TLR that means something. Who'd have thought it? We're going to talk details during this talk. Anyone got a problem with details? No? Everyone like details? Woo! I also got shades. So to end this slide, I also used to work for Black Hills once upon a time, and then I worked for CounterHack. Anyone familiar with the holiday hack? Yeah. If you're not, Google holiday hack challenge. Seriously, the way that I learned information security is by not doing it for pay, but by doing it via CTF. And the holiday hack challenge is absolutely the best free opportunity you have for something like this. It is fantastic. Ed Scotus literally grows gray, and you can't tell. His hair's all white at this point. But you can't tell because he shaves it all off over holiday hack. Absolutely fantastic opportunity. I really, really do recommend it. It's outstanding. So we're talking about TE here. Anyone here done threat emulation in part? Yeah, a little bit. Ironically, a lot of us in the red community have done it, whether we know it or not. And it's valuable. I was doing an assessment earlier this year for an organization, one of our clients, who was ransomed for $1.4 million. So this isn't threat emulation. This is the threat had emulated, and there was no emulation going on. There was just dollar bills. Terrible. We've got a terrifying problem today with ransomware. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's really, really bad. This attack group, they're from North Korea. Hi, North Koreans who are tuning in over the video. We don't extradite. Keep doing what you're doing. It's job security for me. And by that, I'm kidding entirely. It's terrible. We've got a significant problem with ransomware today. And it's getting worse. Has anyone here ever been on the phone with the FBI? That's actually a good answer. It's a good answer. I've actually got a bucket list item, and it's called sending malware to the FBI. Oh, I got to do that. bucket listable, epic. To be fair, they asked me for it. The FBI, ironically, is actually a pretty good resource for communications on the perspective of threat emulation. They, generally speaking, have cells that are dedicated to the larger intrusion sets that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I never force a single one of our clients who's going through, say, incident response, who's going through ransomware, who's trying to get back alive. I never force them to go to the FBI. However, I would posit they've got decent information. And I know that in our community specifically, we always say, oh, the FBI, they don't know anything. And corporate, perhaps that's correct, but I've found that their individualized cells, at the very least have some really solid statistics. And whether they found the information or not, and to be fair, sometimes they are quite solid, but whether they found the information or not, they've collected it. So in the case of this intrusion set, we were able to do attribution. Really helpful for finding out what their TTPs are, what their SOPs are, and also what kind of things they might leave behind. So we're talking about threat emulation, useful information. But also from the perspective of threat hunting. Any threat hunters in the room? Half the people just raised their hand are also threat emulators. What the heck's going on, man? Mind blown. From the perspective of both sides of that pie, it's useful data. It really is. So regarding this intrusion set, specifically, this single one, I was on the phone with the FBI, and they told me from August to May, which is when that intrusion set launched their attack against my client, they had a significant uptick in the content provision, let's say, of this attack group. And it wasn't just a significant uptick in what they were doing, but a significant uptick in what they were pricing themselves at. You go back 2-3 years, 10 to 100 grand, not uncommon for ransomware. And 2 to 3 years ago, Bitcoin. Oh yeah, Bitcoin. Bitcoin saved us so much. And I don't mean because it's Bitcoin. I mean because attackers had the opportunity to monetize in an extringent way that is not related to killing your network and extorting you. Just making you pay more on the electricity bill. That's changed. And it's changed fast. And that's really the world we live in today. And as a result of that, threat emulation isn't just something we need to do. It's something the attackers are consistently doing on all of our environments. And we need to prove the case of that in order to get a good handle on what actual risk is for an organization. So I like to consider it like this. For example, already asked a question about SANS, people who've been in SANS courses. I'm the author of Sec 460. It's the Enterprise Threat and Vulnerability Assessment class at SANS. And I think VA is one of the services we, in our community, and this is on us, do worst. Oh, we are terrible at vulnerability assessment. You know why? Because Nessus and Nexpos and Qualys and, buttons. And we click go. And we do some manual work. We take the logo, delete it, and paste ours over it and deliver to customer. And this is terrible. This is what we call pentest puppy mill syndrome. Oh, it's absolutely terrible. And we do it. And it's why we are where we are today from the perspective of ransomware. Things like Bluekeep. Familiar? Yeah. A month ago, there were over 1 million publicly available remote desktop servers vulnerable to remote code execution via Bluekeep with no network level authentication involved. 1 million on the internet. What actually fascinates me about that exploit is not the external exploitation capability. It's the fact that when you're on the inside, the most important systems are running it. Does anyone know what the most common, like the #1 operating system in use today is? Throw it out there. There's only a couple. Windows. Yes, it's Windows. What version? 7 is really close. XP is wrong. There's only a couple left. We're going to make this awkward. Say it. 2016 is really close, ironically. Windows 10. Yes, that's right. Absolutely. Windows 10, as of January this year, is the #1 operating system in use today. Well done, Microsoft. Microsoft really actually has been doing pretty well lately. And well done, our IT departments. Windows 10 is fantastic. Windows 10 is absolutely fabulous. I'm a red teamer, and I run away screaming and crying from Windows 10. And I'm still successful. The last 3 tests I've done in a row, so the 3 most recent tests, I have gotten domain admin on these environments in less than 3 hours. Every single time of the last 3 tests, less than 3 hours. And I did not touch a single Windows 10 system to do it. Does anyone know what the most common server operating system in use today is? Throw it out there. Windows Server. 2008 R2. Yep, absolutely. And so we've actually got a problem here. And the problem is this differentiation. If you want to buy today a new laptop for your enterprise, because tech refresh, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, you got a tech refresh problem. So you got to buy new equipment. And you want to buy Windows 7. How hard is that? It's actually pretty tough, right? If you're doing a tech refresh and you need to replace desktop workstation user equipment, are you buying Windows 7 stuff today? And if the answer is yes, you're doing a lot of work to make that happen. Which, as a result of that, A, it's difficult not to transition to Windows 10. B, our users have already transitioned because they also buy laptop stuff, right? Hit the Windows key here. There you go. Laptop stuff. And they demand a working environment that is similar at work to what they have at home. So we have 2 factors here. User demand, pushing us to newer operating systems, and it being difficult for the organization not to tech refresh. On the server side, we have the opposite scenario. IT sysadmins. Anyone here? Do you like Windows 2008 more or less than 2016? More? Oh, wow. Well, you're at a security conference, so you are an outlier. You absolutely are an outlier. We as sysadmins, and I say we, learned on these older environments. 2003, 2008, functional level domain controllers, 2003, 2008, and the systems involved, and it's different when you have these weird GUIs that are like PowerShell enabled and stuff. No, don't want that. I've got a job. That job is called availability. I need to do that job, and upgrading makes it harder for me to do that job. User demand, the reverse of our workstation users on the sysadmin side. And upgradability, it's actually a lot of work to upgrade servers. It is. Which means we have the reverse perspective in environments today, servers versus workstations. It's more difficult to change, and the demand on the user side, sysadmins, is not to change. Workstations the opposite. Let's say I were using this really just, fabulous tool called Mimikatz. Anyone familiar with Mimikatz? You should be familiar with Mimikatz. Local security authority subsystem service, LSAS, memory space, having access to plain text credentials is, according to the NSA Red Team, the #1 threat to DoD environments. According to me, the first thing I run when I get onto a system. True, absolutely. And it's why I run away, kicking, screaming, and crying from Windows 10. Microsoft did a fantastic job with protections like Credential Guard, which is Hyper-V-based virtualization to protect the memory space of that process. It's not 100% protection, but it's darn good. It exists in Windows 8.1 and above, which means server-side. Windows 2012 is not included. 2016, 2019, that's it. So when I get on an environment as a bad guy, my first objective is to move from the workstation, not to other workstations, just to servers. The #1 server in use today on internal environments is Windows 2008 R2. The #2, ironically, maybe not ironically, is Server 2003. 3 is Server 2012. Not bad. 4 is Server 2000, not 2016. Ironically, I'll be honest, Server 2000 is normally like the last box in the environment that I actually compromise because it's difficult, because my tools don't work. Who here does script block logging in PowerShell? If you're not raising your hand right now, raise your hand a week from now. Absolutely. Script block logging in PowerShell is ridiculously powerful. These attack groups today are using the heck out of PowerShell, and it's really only the top 5 to 10% of attackers, who we're going to talk about, who actually avoid PowerShell like it's the plague. Because if you're doing script block logging, you're using, I learned once upon a time the synonym for, or homophone anyway, for SIM. Does anyone know what the homophone for SIM is? It's Splunk. Yes, if you use Elk, it's fine. Elk is outstanding. To be fair, if you've used Splunk, it's a lot easier. Solid. It's also expensive. You know what Splunk is? So we call Perl an emulator from traffic to shell, which as attackers, lovely. You know what we call Splunk? An emulator from traffic to dollar bills, y'all. Because they price themselves based off of how much traffic you push into them. They say, oh, you missed the attack. You know what you're doing. You're obviously not sending enough logs to us. Pay us more money. You would have gotten it right if you did so. I absolutely despise Splunk. I hate them from the bottom of my heart. And they are really good. It's actually really nice. But the point is, attackers do a lot of things. And as we talk about threat emulation, we're talking about what these attackers do, how we can actually find them, and how we can emulate that. We are talking today from the attack perspective of this. And a lot of what we're talking about today is doing things that will allow our blue team to be successful. Seriously, we are talking about a lot of things today where our objective is to get caught. When I'm doing red teaming, my job is not to win. It's to get caught. The only question is, when? When I still worked for Black Hills, we were doing a red team for a casino. And I don't work for Black Hills as a result anymore because we won and, you know, retirement package right there. I'm kidding. But we did actually manage to get domain admin access to the environment within 3 hours. And by we, I mean it was Chris Truncher and I had a lot of conversations on the phone. Chris Truncher had a lot of conversations with Cobalt Strike. Well done. And it was over very quickly, at least as far as getting there. The next question on a red team should not be, did we get everything? It should be, what about the blue team? If you're talking in the frame of red team, and the next statement isn't blue team, you're doing it wrong. I actually really hate this concept we have of purple team. Not because it's a bad idea, but because it's a demonstration of how bad we are as a community at red teaming. Because if we have a conversation about red teaming, and red teaming is doing pentest better or being hacksaw-er, it means we're not thinking about the blue team, and we're doing it wrong. I'm not saying that service doesn't matter. This is threat emulation. But from the perspective of red team, that's not what red team's about. Red team is always, always about making the blue team better, making the organization's response to attack better. And so if we want to, after having done red team and identifying what blue team's problems are, fixing them over time, and then focusing on testing, right? Testing what the reality of our risk actually is, that's where we get into threat emulation. The difference between threat emulation and red team is not, oh, with red team I'm doing threat tile tactics. No, no, no. With red team, I care about the blue team. I care about the organization response. With threat emulation, I'm testing to see if the reality, considering a specific intrusion set, is what we as an organization think it actually is. With threat emulation, it's not about winning. It's about losing. And if we win, it means we did something wrong before we got there. Let's identify that. Let's fix it. Let's do it better. Because right now we've got a huge problem with ransomware. A huge, huge problem with ransomware. I've got a folder in my C:/directory called malware, all caps, because it's all full of ransomware and I don't want to double click on it on accident. Not saying I did that, but I may have done that. And these are all just different samples from different intrusion sets today because the monetization model for this is redonkulous. Going back to that FBI conversation that I had, from August of last year to May of this year, they had from that intrusion set more than 100 compromises. These are compromises where that organization called the FBI. If your organization were compromised and ransomware, would you call the FBI? Or would you expect your organization to call the FBI? It's not a trick question. The answer is probably like 20% yes. Like legitimately, it's 20% yes, because your management in general does, generally speaking, actually trust the US government. It's a weird situation considering the day. But they actually do have value to provide us. And the FBI, I know a lot of people think, oh, they're going to force you to report, to tell them information, to publicly release information. The answer is that's not true at all. It's a really big misnomer on the FBI side. I know a lot of people are terrified of them, but they're actually really good at just being helpful these days. Whether or not they're capable to that level or not, that is their objective. They're doing pretty darn well from that perspective. But organizations, generally speaking, do not want to report, and that's fair. So when I say this intrusion set from August of last year to May of this year had 100 compromises the FBI is aware of, realize I'm talking about 20% of the pot. And from the FBI's perspective, ransomware fees were between $0.8 million and $3.5 million for this specific one intrusion set. That is not my budget when I'm doing threat emulation. That has never been my budget doing threat emulation, and I used to do it for the government. And they tend to have this, we're going to print more money if we need more money mentality. It's still not that level of budget. So when we talk about threat emulation, it's not to win. Because if our objective is to win, realize that our competition has a near infinite budget that we do not have. So if our perspective is we need to win to do service provision, we are never going to be able to do it at the level that they potentially could. Now that said, when we talk about threat emulation, they don't. And by don't, I mean they legitimately don't do good work. It's insulting to me when I'm on a actual a threat hunt, right? I'm on a threat hunt and I see malware running, and its name is randomized 25-character string. If you look at task list, right? Where's the randomized 25-character string here? There are obviously things running, and yay Microsoft for having weird names, but none of these are 25 characters. You run task list and you see the malware, and they're running this on half of the environment from November to May, and we miss it. And in a lot of our environments, we don't miss that. We actually identify it. We do a really good job of threat hunting. We absolutely dominate this level of attack. That's solid. Threat emulation is the discipline, the science of proving that. If we do things that suck, and by suck, I mean they're noobish, they're a 32-character executable that obviously shows up in task list, and we do this during a threat emulation, it's not because we don't realize how you would find that. If you're a good threat emulator today, you are also really, really cognizant of what blue team is doing to find stuff, and what you're doing is you're testing that. Because red services, particularly red team and threat emulation, they're about testing the blue team. So as far as why we do this, the importance of something like this, it's entirely related to the situation, the reality we live in today, insofar as the planet is getting hacked, right? 1995, hack the planet. Right now, that is a reality. That is what we're living in. On the perspective of, do we have job security? Golden age of cybersecurity right now. Golden age of cybersecurity right now. Absolutely. We are irreplaceable assets for organizations because ransomware, extortion, bad guys. And with threat emulation, it's actually all threat-centric. It's about being the bad guy and showing the organization, yay or nay, which threat may or may not have the capability to interdict your environment. So we're not talking necessarily about Tier 1, but we are also talking about Tier 1. The question is, where in that spectrum is your organization, and are we okay threat, risk acceptance, risk tolerance level with what the reality of that conversation, what that question actually is. And threat emulation is all about identifying that. So as far as I'm concerned, red is my bread and butter. I absolutely love red. It's my thing. Was anyone here for the keynote on day one with John Hamm? John Hamm's one of my best friends. I mentioned before we got started with the talk that I had left my laptop in the bar yesterday. Almost didn't have slides. I will blame John Hamm for that. Yep, totally not my fault. He was really drunk and I walked him back to his room. So it's totally his fault, not mine. But John is absolutely outstanding because his perspective is identifying my stuff, right? That's what he does. So we have conversations going back and forth all the time on, oh, this is what I'm doing lately, and this is what you should be looking for. So for those who are here, he pulled up a bro screenshot. And in the bro screenshot, he had DNS, HTTPS, and then HTTP, 553, 443, and 80 port related as a number one or top three set of conversations happening in bro. That's typical. That's almost always what you will see. Those three ports, almost always. And if you see FTP, I'm sorry. It's probably not malicious, ironically, but I'm sorry. Those are normally the top three that you'll actually see. And so he said, let's look at DNS. And he does in the talk, right? And he says, okay, what do we do next? Well, HTTPS and HTTP are there. Jake Williams is super good. He would never use HTTP, right? Let's completely exclude that. Let's go to HTTPS. I'll be honest with you right now. I have transitioned the vast majority of my tactics, transport related, from 443 to 80. I do most of my high-level C2 today over HTTP, not HTTPS. John found Jake Williams via settings in the HTTPS certificate. There's more complexity in HTTPS, which means there's more space to do detection. Absolutely, there absolutely is. And as a result of it, red teamer, I run away from that kicking and screaming. And so when we talk about this conversation between red and blue, I'm on the red side. But the conversation needs to happen. Defense does not happen unless we actually have an offensive perspective, if we have this threat-centric approach. So what we do on the attack side is valuable not because we look cool and we print out a report that says, we hacked the planet, man, and your organization got compromised in less than 3 hours. No, it's because we show off what potentially could happen, pentest, how fast your blue team is able to respond to that. Was it faster, perhaps, than we were able to access it? Red team, threat emulation. Did you detect it because we were going after tactics to accomplish that objective that are standard, right? And my perspective is, if you get hacked, you breathe. Congratulations. If you have the perspective today that we need to prevent our environment from getting hacked, you are going to lose. You are going to lose. If alternatively, your perspective is, I need to beat the attacker before they exfiltrate my IP, before they ransomware all of my systems, not one, all of my systems, then we have a very different conversation going on, right? We have the opportunity to win. Let's say I'm red, right? We're having the threat-centered conversation here, and I want to do ransomware because I want to retire rich and live my life with at least 5 Lamborghinis. Do I drop my ransomware after I get access to your first system? I mean, I can get money from ransomware your first system, potentially. Probably not, but potentially, right? $10, $20, $30? $1.4 million? No. No, absolutely not. The attack group related to this compromise that we're kind of talking about throughout this talk, they deleted the backups. They weren't in from November to May because they were looking for domain admin. It was MS17010 Eternal Blue on their domain controller, which was 2008 R2. It's unfortunate. It's life. But as a result of that, between November and December, they went from, oh, we phished you and we got code execution, to we're domain admin, no worries. So they're domain admin in December, and they don't launch until May. Why? Backups. These intrusion sets today They are not doing the whole WannaCry, this is all completely 100% automated stuff. They are doing real interactive operations to maximize the value proposition of their work. And when we talk about threat emulation, we are talking about real interactive, red teamer, operations to demonstrate what that actually looks like. From a pentest perspective, we're seeing what could happen, but we're not necessarily thinking about the results of all of those things. And we should be, which is why threat emulation matters. Has anyone here seen C2 traffic in general today? And by C2, I mean like on Twitter, how many new C2 systems exist? I would call today the golden age of command and control systems. We've got Covenant, we've got Chaotic, we've got Prismatica, we've got Cobalt Strike, we've got Scythe. Woo! Back to the room. Scythe. We have infinite numbers today of opportunity case as far as C2 goes. And you know what? A lot of them suck. A lot of them suck. Why? Endgame. I was doing essentially a red team, but it's a SANS class where we essentially do red team against blue team. And the army showed up. And they brought Endgame with them. Endgame. Oh, an EDR product. It's going to definitely wreck us, right? Endgame specifically does build their detections against things like Cobalt Strike. That's what they detect. That is what they're focused on. Which means if you're a C2 tool and you're either open source or you're for sale, they bought that and they try to detect on that. If you're an attacker who stands to gain $1.4 million, is it perhaps viable to manual? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not saying they don't use Cobalt Strike. There's actually a huge number of intrusion sets who do rely on Cobalt Strike for post-exploitation capability because Cobalt Strike is amazing. It's fantastic. But their direct execution is not based on that. It's manual because Endgame, Cobalt, Carbon Black, Bit9, Silence. Yesterday before this talk, and I'm talking about 2 specific pieces of malware during this talk, I went to the Silence booth, and Josh, the guy over at Silence booth, said, hey, come over, drop your pieces of malware on my system. Let's see if they work. Yeah, 100%. Completely on the radar. Were they awesome? This is the main code sequence of one of these pieces of malware. Most of this is comments, and even then it's only 84 lines. There are a couple other packages, but the majority is just that. I did a Security Weekly talk last year, and we built, in 15 minutes live on Security Weekly, custom zero-day malware. To this day, that malware, even though it was on a Security Weekly, bypasses every single EDR system and antivirus system I have come in contact with. To be fair, it's pretty basic, so I don't tend to use it as much myself, but it bypasses all of them because they're not focused on that problem. But if we think about it from our perspective as attackers, as red teamers, as threat emulators, when you get code execution, again, you don't drop your ransomware, you now have a problem to solve. You need to move laterally, you need to get system, you need to privilege escalate, you need to find the backups, delete the backup, you need to do stuff, right? And just running commands is not the equivalent of doing stuff. It's just not. And so as a result, what we have is post-exploitation. And traditionally, post-exploitation is based on whatever tool you're using. Meterpreter. Anyone here used a Meterpreter before? Metasploit? Woo! Metasploit's Meterpreter is fantastic. I know a lot of people hate it these days because EDR wrecks it, and it does. But if we look at the code base for Meterpreter, it's all Win32 API calls. It's one of the best sources of libraries for building your own malware out there. It is fabulous. Metasploit's Meterpreter today, if you go back into the code that was written a decade, 2 decades ago, is some of the best code for threat emulators out there, period. We just don't look at it. I'm not saying use Meterpreter. I'm saying go to the .c source for timestomp.c, etc., and compile that, deliver that, and you've got that capability outside of Meterpreter. Antivirus is not looking for that because it's Win32 API. Why? Win32 API is how Windows runs. It is. And so traditionally, as far as libraries of exploitation opportunity go, we've got PowerShell. Ever used PowerShell before? I love PowerShell. PowerShell Empire is suddenly, as of August, no longer supported, and it's going to be out of use. And it was always a bit finicky and a bit buggy, but at least as far as post-exploitation capability go, you got PowerView, you got PowerSploit. It's amazing. I almost never use it today when I'm on tests for decent security firms. Why? Because PowerShell script block logging, if you're doing PowerShell defenses right and using a SIM, you can absolutely detect that. PowerShell's really well orchestrated by Microsoft. They did a great, great job. That's the top 20% of organizations. That's not the bottom 80%. So when we say PowerShell is no longer where we're going, it's where we've been, and it's 80% of the time where we can still go, honestly. So if you got a backdoor, and that backdoor needs to have post-exploit capability, PowerShell is not out of the question. Next, where we're going as a community is called C#. Anyone familiar with .NET assemblies? No, neither am I. I've heard the term. I've written them. What the heck is that? Like the CLR with type names? And the way no, never mind. It's weird. I look at MSDM, I copy, I paste, I fill in the blanks. That's what I do as a threat emulator, absolutely. Be it C++, C#, or Rust. That's it. C# is where we're going as a community because C# has the ability to execute arbitrary everything. It's really freaking powerful. But C# is also where Microsoft's going. Just like PowerShell 10 years ago was where Microsoft was going. And in the interim, they developed a significantly outstanding solution. Script block logging, PowerShell version 4 and 5, geez, it is really well done. AMSI built-in support, anti-malware service instrumentation, really solid. Like, this is absolutely fantastic stuff. There's a reason red teamers like me don't try to bypass. We just go somewhere else, like C#. 10 years from now, C# will likely have the exact same experience. I'm not saying it's going to take 10 years. It's going to be within the next 10 years. I think I've actually got a decent amount of confidence with Microsoft today, and I'm shocked to say that. I think it's going to be 3 to 5. We're going to have .NET introspection, and C# is going to be difficult for threat emulation purposes. I think so. You know what isn't? Win32 API. You know what else isn't? Impacket. And from the Impacket, it is Python. You can run Python on Windows. In fact, if your backdoor has a Python interpreter compiled into it, you can do that live at runtime inside a Windows environment. One of my biggest and best bypasses for EDR is Python, because they don't think it's on Windows. So I put it there. Whether it's only in memory or actually installed to disk, I put it there, and it's over. There's no, did I win or did I lose? No, it's over, because the conversation has changed. And so when we talk about what our malware should be from the perspective of things like threat emulation, it's not about what can our backdoor do, it's what can our system support. Be it PowerSploit, Sharpsploit, right? PowerShell, C#, Python, Win32 API, LOLBAS, living off the land, binaries or scripts. What can my backdoor support as a infrastructure for performing post-exploitation style work? And so as far as stealth goes, the question about which one of those do we prefer does matter, right? And from my perspective, it's Win32 API, all the way. Literally, if you're talking about tier 1 threat emulation, be evil, Win32 API. It's miserable. It sucks. C++, C on Windows, yeah, it hurts. It really hurts. This backdoor versus that Python one I was talking about earlier on Security Weekly. 15 minutes on the Python side to make work for the full framework. This backdoor took me 40 hours to get communicable, as in talkable, right? Win32 API sucks. It's really, really hard. And you know what? Microsoft is not going to develop new security identification measures inside of it. Absolutely, they're going to continue to build on PowerShell. Absolutely, they're going to continue to build on .NET, .NET Core. Win32 API? JScript.net? No, absolutely not. My thoughts on how to emulate, go old. Go old. Because not only does it work today, it will work tomorrow, and the day after, and 10 years from now, because backdoor compatibility, or backdoor compatibility, in fact. Backwards compatibility is backdoor compatibility, and we need to realize that. On the perspective of communication, transport is also really important. When we talk about stealth, shell is what every backdoor supports, and we need to realize that so are the defenders looking for that. Script log logging, command line logging, those are things EDR products do that is outstanding. I'm not saying, like when I was ragging on Endgame, I'm not saying it's bad, because when I mean that we bypass it, I'm not talking about bypass. EDR is substantially different from antivirus. Antivirus is about blocking. EDR is about giving you the opportunity to identify. And so script log logging, command line logging is really powerful. And if you're doing top-level emulation, the number one, thou shalt not, is pass to shell. Because that's how you get caught. Same with PowerShell. Golden Age of C2, there's a lot of those systems on the commercial and open source side. But when we talk about what your actual capability should be, we're really talking about the CLR, right? The common language runtime in Microsoft. If you're doing it on, say, a Unix system, it's not a CLR, but on a Unix system, it's a different story. It's still the wild, wild west by far. But if we're talking about bypassing these billion-dollar organizations like Endgame, like Carbon Black, which is now, I guess, owned by VMware, but those organizations, what we need to be able to do is be flexible. And having support for the CLR is the genesis of that flexibility. And so what we've got, and I'm releasing today, is a backdoor written in Rust. Why is it Rust? Because the backdoor is named Ravenclaw. Anyone here? Was anyone here for my talk last year? Couple folks? Nice. I've got a C2 tool called Diagon. And last year I released a backdoor called Gryffindor, so of course, needed to fix that. Here we go. And R works together, so that's why Rust. And it was a big mistake. Rust is miserable to work in, because everything that you do in Rust needs to be done properly. And I'm a hacker, and I don't do anything right. Fact. But the idea here isn't what Rust can do. Was anyone here for the offensive Golang talk? Fantastic talk. It's not about what Rust can do. It's not about what Golang can do. It's about what these systems support. And so it's not in Rust because Rust is awesome by any means. It's in Rust because. But the purpose of this backdoor is to invoke assembly, C# support, is to run Win32 API calls, Windows kernel support. It's to run PowerShell unmanaged. Why? 80% of organizations have still not actually implemented any security, despite what Microsoft has given them for free. And so when we start talking about what our C2 framework needs to be on threat emulation side, what we need is flexibility. Not because of our max capability, but more importantly, because we need to get caught. We don't need to win, we need to get caught. And so we need to be able to do all the things attackers do, and that's hard, in order to make sure that our organization catches us when they should. And so the idea of Ravenclaw is to run these kinds of things. It's got built-in Python, to run these kinds of things so that we can prove whether we are, yes, getting caught, or no, unfortunately, not getting caught when we should be. And to the perspective, OMG Rust, ouch. The idea of Project Prismatica is to allow for these kinds of things, and when you see this UI, think of, say, Cobalt Strike, the ability to interact with multiple and team server style different backdoors, and most importantly, execute the one piece of malware in the world called calc.exe with modern things in mind from specifically a flexibility perspective. If I deleted calculator, demo wouldn't have worked. Neither would hacks. Right, Joff? Delete calc, you win. Epic. In any case, that's my time. Any questions before I run off stage very fast? This is all open source, by the way. It is free. It is out there. JavaScript rat, Rust rat. Epic. I will be around, so feel free to come find me. I'm happy to nerd out with y'all, because that's what I do.